There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a tag. This is the Popcorn Opening Paragraphs tag, originated by Adrian at Stripped Cover Lit. I watched his video, the original tag video, and I also watched Bookish's version of the tag, and Bookish certainly made it into an open tag, and here I am. So the purpose of this tag is to just share opening paragraphs from some of your favorite books. So longtime subscribers will know what some of my favorite books are, but I like the fact that Bookish withheld the author and title until after he'd shared the reading, and I like that kind of thing too. So here is the first one. Once our father bought a convertible. Don't ask me. I was 5. He bought it and drove it home as casually as he'd bring a gallon of rocky road. Picture our mother's surprise. She kept rubber bands on the doorknobs. She washed old plastic bags and hung them on the line to dry, a string of thrifty, tame jellyfish floating in the sun. Imagine her scrubbing the cheese smell out of a plastic bag on its 3rd or 4th go-around when our father pulls up in a Chevy convertible. Used, but nevertheless, a moving metal landscape, chrome bumpers, and what looks like acres of molded silver car flesh. He saw it parked downtown with a for sale sign and decided to be the kind of man who buys a car on a whim. We can see as he pulls up that the manic joy has started to fade for him. The car is already an embarrassment. He cruises into the driveway with a frozen smile that matches the Chevy's grill. Of course, the car has to go. Our mother never sets foot. My older brother Carlton and I get taken for one drive. Carlton is ecstatic. I am skeptical. If our father would buy a car on a street corner, what else might he do? Who does this make him? So that's the opening to a novel that meant a lot to me as a young gay man. So we're talking 1990. There's 3 point of view characters. One of them is the gay guy, and he's in love with his best friend, and then they end up in New York City together in a kind of vibrant, unforgettable menage a trois of sorts with a straight woman named Claire. This novel came at a time in my life when I was struggling to live a fabulously and very deeply sexual gay life, and also what friendship meant with straight people and with gay men in particular, as I was fumbling towards ecstasy. And that novel is A Home at the End of the World by Michael Cunningham. It's my favorite gay novel. For a long time I considered it to be my favorite novel. It's certainly a very important novel still for me, and I look back on it very fondly. Don't watch the movie, but do check out the book. A Home at the End of the World by Michael Cunningham. Book number 2. This one will be a slightly longer section. When the phone rang, I was in the kitchen, boiling a pot full of spaghetti and whistling along to an FM broadcast of the overture to Rossini's The Thieving Magpie, which has to be the perfect music for cooking pasta. I wanted to ignore the phone, not only because the spaghetti was nearly done, but because Claudio Abbado was bringing the London Symphony to its musical climax. Finally, though, I had to give in. It could have been someone with news of a job. I turned down the gas, went to the living room, and picked up the receiver. 10 minutes, please, said a woman on the other end. I'm good at recognizing people's voices, but this was not one I knew. Excuse me? To whom did you wish to speak? To you, of course. 10 minutes, please. That's all we need to understand each other. Her voice was low and soft, but otherwise nondescript. Understand each other? Each other's feelings. I leaned over and peeked through the kitchen door. The spaghetti pot was steaming nicely, and Claudio Abbado was still conducting The Thieving Magpie. Sorry, but you caught me in the middle of cooking spaghetti. Could you call back later? Spaghetti? What are you doing cooking spaghetti at 10:30 in the morning? That's none of your business, I said. I decide what I eat and when I eat it. Fair enough, I'll call back, she said, her voice now flat and expressionless. A slight change in mood can do amazing things to the tone of a person's voice. This was one of the first Japanese novels I read, and it also introduced me to a new author, one who I became quite obsessed with for many years. And I read this novel. It was published in Japan in the early 1990s, the English translation, 1997. And I read it maybe 10 years after that. And while it's not the most Japanese of Japanese novels out there, it played a large part in deepening my interest in all things Japanese. And that novel is The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. It's my favorite of his novels, and someday I would like to reread it now that I live in Tokyo. I kind of like to visit all the places that are where the story is set in, and just re-experience it as a Tokyoite myself now. But certainly it has a special place in my personal canon of favorite novels. Book number 3. In a single year, my father left us twice. The first time to end his marriage, and the second when he took his own life. That year, 1989, my mother flew to Hong Kong and laid my father to rest in a cemetery near the Chinese border. Afterwards, distraught, she rushed home to Vancouver, where I had been alone. I was 10 years old. This novel was published just a few years ago, won a bunch of awards. When I first heard of it, I thought, that is not a book that I particularly want to read. It's very much a Chinese-themed novel, and a novel about classical music, specifically classical musicians and composers in China from around the Chinese Revolution to the present. And I thought, I'm not that interested in China, I'm not that interested in music, and I decided to give it a go because of all the buzz. And I fell into this novel, and I didn't come out for about 2 months. I think I read it over 2 or 3 months, and it is now, hands down, my favorite novel of my entire reading life. And well, it didn't particularly deepen my interest in music, but I loved the writing about music here. It certainly got me deeply interested in Chinese literature and Chinese history and all things China. And that novel is Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Tien. This is a Marmite book, as they say in the UK. It's won a lot of awards and received high praise here on BookTube and elsewhere, but there's also a lot of people that really dislike it immensely. But it is my favorite novel of all time. And this is one of the 3 signed copies that I have. I should reread it one of these days. I just started a collection of her short stories today, or yesterday, and I loved the first story. The collection and the title story that I read yesterday and today is called Simple Recipes, but I recommend this novel heartily, and I will still love you, even if you don't like it. But if you love it, we're soulmates. Book number 4. On the morning after the feds burned down her house and took her father, Hava woke from dreams of sea anemones. While the girl dressed, Ahmed, who hadn't slept at all, paced outside the bedroom door, watching the sky brighten on the other side of the window glass. The rising sun had never before made him feel late. When she emerged from the bedroom, looking older than her 8 years, he took her suitcase and she followed him out the front door. He had led the girl to the middle of the street before he raised his eyes to what had been her house. "Hava, we should go," he said. But neither moved. Well, this is my second favorite novel of all time, which I also have read in the last few years, and it is set in Chechnya. There are 2 timelines during the First and Second Chechnyan rebellions, or revolutionary wars. This opening paragraph is set in 2004 and 1994, I believe. About 10 years earlier is the other major timeline, and in the years in between. And this is a story about war. It's not really, none of the people that are main characters are soldiers particularly, but they are living through this wartime, this bloody time in their history. And I was amazed by the emotional power of it and the way that humor is used, not only to lighten the mood so you don't want to slit your wrists from reading the horrific things that happen to these people that you can't help but fall in love with, but the way that humor is employed to deepen the hold those characters have on your heart, and as a way of understanding the human condition, because war is many things, but it's also laughable. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please try this book. This is A Constellation of Vital Phenomena by Anthony Mara. Just an indescribably wonderful novel. And lastly, book number 5. The new curate seemed quite a nice young man, but what a pity it was that his combinations showed, tucked carelessly into his socks when he sat down. Belinda had noticed it when they had met him for the first time at the vicarage last week, and had felt quite embarrassed. Perhaps Harriet could say something to him about it. Her blunt, jolly manner could carry off these little awkwardnesses much better than Belinda's timidity. Of course, he might think it none of their business, as indeed it was not, but Belinda rather doubted whether he thought at all, if one were to judge by the quality of his first sermon. Oh my God, that's my favorite. Of all 5, that's the best opening ever! Do you know what combinations are? According to the Oxford Dictionary, I had to refresh my memory. It's a single undergarment covering the body and legs. Woolen combinations. So, let me give you that first sentence again. The new curate seemed quite a nice young man, but what a pity it was that his combination showed, tucked carelessly into his socks when he sat down. This is the debut novel from the mid-20th century by someone who has become my favorite, one of my very most favorite writers. And as you can see by that opening, it's comedic and very churchy. And what I appreciate underneath all of that is a dark profundity about being lonely and craving love, characteristic of typical heroine of this novelist, which are typically spinsters, eccentric spinsters. And it's that undertow of yearning that I connect with the deepest. Yes, they're hilarious. Almost peed my pants when I read that to you just now. And the yearning is so compelling. I don't think everyone responds to that undertow the way I do, but I find these novels to be bittersweet joy, and I absolutely love them. And that is the debut novel by Barbara Pym, Some Tame Gazelle. And I think it's still my favorite, but I think I've got 3 favorites. So that's one, A Glass of Blessings, and No Fond Return of Love. Those 3 are tied for my favorites. I'm reading her oeuvre in sequence. I'm in the middle of one of the ones that was published at the very end of her life that she had been writing and revising for a couple decades. The Sweet Dove Died. But those 3, out of all the ones I've read so far, are my favorite. And Some Tame Gazelle is a novel that she started writing when she was in her mid-20s, perhaps. And she was imagining what her life would be like with her sister, who was similarly a young woman, if they grew up to be spinsters. And so she was projecting their relationship into the future. And in fact, that was, her sister did marry, and was married for not terribly long, and Barbara Pym never did marry. But this was her imagining her future spinsterhood. And what an absolute delight. So, Barbara Pym, I recommend her very highly. There's many videos where I've waxed ecstatically about Barbara. So, I'll shut up now. This was a great tag. I should tag some people. I didn't think about that when I was preparing to do this video, but Doris, of all the books, for sure. And then otherwise, I'll just go to my comments section. Britta Böhler, add it to your list. Mel's Bookland Adventures. I have blanked on her name, her channel name, this lovely South African booktuber, A Journey Through Books. To see you do this tag. Jaclyn of 6 Minutes for Me. Karen of Runwright Reads. Rick from Another Book Vlog. Oops, sorry Rick. From Another Book Vlog. Oh, and I almost forgot. Just one reader. Please. And open. Anybody else? Please do it. That's all. Thanks for watching.